The first morning in my villa felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. No calls, no footsteps, no one asking what's for dinner or if I could help with a quick loan. Just me, bare feet on cool hardwood floors, carrying a mug of coffee that didn't need to be reheated 3 times before I could drink it. The ocean wasn't far. I could hear the soft rhythm of waves if I left the patio door cracked. But mostly, what I heard was peace. I bought this house without telling anyone, not my mother, not my sister, not even my closest friend from college, who usually knew everything. The villa was a quiet decision, a $3 million declaration of independence. After decades of being the one who adjusted, who bent, who gave, I wanted one thing that was entirely, irrevocably mine. It wasn't the square footage I was paying for. It was the silence. Unpacking felt ceremonial. Every item I pulled from a box and placed onto a shelf marked a line between the woman I used to be and the woman I had become. The kitchen, open and filled with morning light, was my favorite. It reminded me of those homes in lifestyle magazines where everything looked effortless. I wasn't aiming for perfection, though, just sovereignty. There were 5 sets of keys. I held all of them. That mattered. Keys weren't just metal. They were boundaries. Control. My name was the only one on the deed, the bills, the mailbox. Finally, I moved through the living room and checked the locks, not because I felt unsafe, but because it gave me something to do. A ritual to start the day. Twist, click, check, one door at a time. And then, one afternoon, I heard voices. At first, I thought it was the neighbors. I had the sliding doors open in the back, and maybe the sound carried. But the tone wasn't distant. It was familiar. Too familiar. When I stepped back inside from the garden, the grocery bag in my hand slipped. Eggs shattered on the tile. Apples rolled under the console table, but I didn't move to pick them up. I couldn't. Standing in the hallway, I saw Verena, my sister, holding a measuring tape, stretching it along the baseboard like she was preparing for renovations. Mom, seated casually on the arm of my reading chair, sipped coffee from a stainless steel mug. 2 strangers, one with a clipboard and one with a camera, stood near the dining area, pointing at the ceiling and taking notes. Verena didn't even flinch when she saw me. "You weren't supposed to be here yet," she said, like I was early to a meeting we'd both agreed on. I blinked. My voice stayed buried somewhere behind my ribs. "Elspeth, Mom," smiled faintly. "This place is just perfect for the kids. And you, of course. There's plenty of space." The woman with the clipboard glanced up briefly. "Prime potential for a dual family conversion. Great bones." The floor shifted beneath me. I looked down, half expecting the tiles to give way. No one had told me they were coming. No one had asked. Verena moved around like she owned the air. "Do you want the office turned into a nursery, or should we just take one of the guest rooms?" she asked Mom, not even glancing in my direction. "I'm thinking we leave the master suite as is." "I agree," Mom replied. "The sun comes in beautifully in the mornings." I took a step forward, past the eggs and toward the dining room. No one moved to help. No one apologized. My key, my actual house key, still hung from the lock behind me. "Since you've all had your look," I said quietly, each word measured, "I assume you'll be leaving now." It wasn't a question. Mom stood, smoothing her skirt. Verena didn't look at me. The clipboard woman murmured something about revisiting options and headed for the door. Verena's boyfriend, or husband, I didn't care, kissed my cheek on the way out like we'd just finished brunch. I shut the door behind them, locked it, deadbolt, chain. Only then did I breathe. The next hour passed in silence. I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water I never drank. The air smelled like lavender, not from anything I owned. I followed the scent to the armchair. A silk scarf lay draped over the side. Mom's, soft pink with lilac trim. She'd left it intentionally, I was sure. A marker, a claim. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. The scent was subtle but invasive, like a note left in the margin of a contract you never agreed to sign. I walked the house, every drawer, every lock. I opened the cabinet where I kept the spare keys. 2 were gone. I checked the windows. Nothing broken. No signs of forced entry, but they'd been here. Inside, I opened the hallway closet and found a roll of blue painter's tape sitting on the shelf. There were small pieces of it still stuck to the floor by the guest room, measuring guides, I guessed. They weren't visiting, they were planning. I sat back down, pressed my palms flat against the cool granite countertop, and tried to steady the shaking. It wasn't fear. It was fury wearing a silk blouse. I called the locksmith. Later that night, I stood at the front door and stared at the new set of keys he handed me. I held them tightly, felt the edges cut into my skin. I bought peace, I whispered to no one, but they'd seen it as a placeholder. The scarf was still on the counter the next morning. I didn't touch it, didn't need to. Its message had already landed. We were here, and we expect to return. I made coffee, stared out the window for a long time, and told myself I wouldn't overreact. I'd change the locks, secure the system, set boundaries, simple steps, logical, measured. But then I saw it. On the hallway console, beneath a set of mailers I hadn't gotten around to tossing, was a piece of folded paper, printer paper, handwritten in blue ink. I opened it slowly, like I already knew it would hurt. It was a floor plan, roughly sketched but recognizable. My villa, every room labeled. Master, Verena. Guest, Mom. Storage, Lenny. Not Lenora, not owner, just Lenny, tucked into a corner like an afterthought. A storage note, an auxiliary function. The handwriting was unmistakable. My mother's cursive had always looped too tightly. She used hearts instead of dots over her eyes. I didn't cry. I just sat on the arm of the couch, the same one Mom had claimed yesterday, and stared at the paper. My thumb pressed into the crease at the center like I could erase the fold. Erase what it meant. Was this ever mine to them? Or had it always been a holding zone for someone else's life? The kitchen felt different that morning. Not mine, exactly. A few things had moved, spices rearranged, pantry items consolidated. Nothing major, but not mine. Subtle fingerprints, like smudges on glass. I opened the fridge. There was a half-eaten yogurt I hadn't bought. My brand, but not my flavor. The vanilla one Mom always picked. My pulse tapped against the inside of my wrist. I grabbed the floor plan and walked through the house. The guest room had an extra pillow. The throw blanket folded differently. In the bathroom drawer, someone had left a travel toothbrush, used. Back in the kitchen, I remembered something Verena once said over dinner, years ago. You'll know when people start living in your silence. At the time, she meant emotionally, but now, it was literal. They were moving in, one drawer at a time. Later that afternoon, I sat on the patio scrolling my phone, needing distance from the inside of my own house. The sun had started to fall west, dragging shadows across the tiles. A text popped up from Madison, a friend from my first job out of college. We weren't close, but still kept in touch over holidays and birthdays. Heard your sister's moving into that dream house near the coast. Lucky kids. You always were generous. I blinked. What? What do you mean? I typed back. She replied almost instantly. Verena posted a story yesterday, something about claiming peace for her family. Thought she meant you two were living together? No, I didn't reply that. I just stared at the screen, felt my grip tighten. I took a screenshot. I joined then another, then forwarded them to Brian, my business attorney. I didn't add a message. He'd know what to do with it. This wasn't a joke anymore. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't even hurtful. It was presumptive, calculated. It wasn't the lie that hurt, I muttered out loud to no one. It was the assumption they had the right to tell it. That night, I walked through every room again, this time with a notebook in hand. In the dishwasher, a mug that said, "World's Best Grandma." I didn't have kids. That mug hadn't come from me. In the laundry room, a basket full of folded towels I didn't fold, a dryer sheet brand I never bought. I moved into the office and opened my desk drawer. At the top was a new receipt, Pottery Barn, 2 accent chairs, delivery address, my villa, paid with someone else's credit card, but under my shipping preferences. 2 days ago. I closed the drawer slowly. Verena had borrowed my phone a few weeks ago. Said she needed to Google a sofa while we were grabbing lunch. I handed it over without thinking. I always did. This wasn't inconsideration, this was implementation. They weren't waiting, they were building. I sat on the bed for a long time, watching the shadows stretch long across the floor as the day faded out. Then I stood up, walked to my laptop, and started locking things down. Changed passwords, called the security company, and scheduled a system refresh. Asked for a smart home access log, told them to flag any new IP logins. By the time I finished, it was past 9. The house was quiet. Not peaceful quiet, untrusting quiet. I didn't like it. I poured a glass of water and leaned against the counter, staring into the dark living room. And I remembered a night 6 months ago. Dinner with the family. Chinese takeout. Verena had laughed over sesame noodles and said, "If Lenny ever hits it big, we're all moving in with her." Everyone laughed. Even me. I thought it was a joke. But now, looking around the villa, the floor plan, the reorganized pantry, the email alerts, and the mug in my dishwasher, it felt more like a prophecy. They weren't moving in. They'd already started. I sat on the floor, back against the cabinets, and opened my notebook. Wrote 5 words, slow and clear. They don't think it's mine. Then, underneath it, and maybe that's something I need to let them know. It was a Friday evening when the photo arrived. I'd just settled into my reading chair, the one that somehow hadn't yet been claimed or rearranged by anyone but me. The sky outside the villa was streaked with late September light, quiet and gentle, and I almost let myself believe it would stay that way. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Marla, an old colleague who now worked in event marketing across the bay. We'd collaborated on my firm's launch celebration a few months back, the kind of thing I poured heart, money, and late nights into, something I was proud of. The image she sent was of the group photo we took that night. There I was, centered, smiling. But beside me, to the left, was a very visible, very deliberate gap. The space where my parents should have been. They never came. Not because they were sick or out of town. Not because of work. They just didn't come. When I asked, gently, after the event, my mother had said, "Callista had a PTA meeting." We couldn't miss it, you understand. Sure, I always understood. Looking at that empty space in the photo felt like rereading an old journal entry you didn't realize you'd never finished. A sentence with no punctuation. A story everyone pretended was complete. That night, I printed the photo and slid it into a drawer in the hallway console. Not torn, not burned, just stored, like a piece of evidence I didn't know I'd need yet. Some erasures are so quiet, they don't sting until much later. A few days after that, Mom invited me to lunch. "I found this new place in Carmel," she said. "Tea, little sandwiches. Very you." I went. Because I was still playing the part of the daughter who wanted reconciliation, even though I knew what the scene would be. She was already seated when I arrived, a pot of chamomile steeping between us. Her cardigan matched the china. The whole place looked like a Pinterest board curated by someone who believed conflict could be cured by lemon curd. "You look well," she said, pouring tea like we hadn't just gone to war over property lines and respect. I smiled thinly. "I am." "You've always been the strong one, Lenny," she continued. "Not like Callista. She's trying, but she really needs stability right now, especially with the twins." There it was, the praise as punishment. "Strong," I repeated. Funny how that's the word people use when they want you to stay quiet and carry the heavier box. Mom blinked, just once, then folded her napkin like I'd said nothing. "Your sister doesn't have what you have," she said calmly. "She doesn't have my house," I corrected. The conversation didn't rise in volume, no plates shattered, but the knife slid in just the same. "Lenny," she said, her voice tightening, "you know I don't mean it that way." I leaned back, tea untouched. Funny how strength becomes the excuse to give everything away, including my home. She didn't argue, just changed the subject. Asked about a coworker, pretended like everything was still civil, like that civility hadn't cost me pieces of myself over the years. I paid the bill. Back home, I took the receipt and taped it into my notebook. I had a new rule now. Anything said to me with a smile that undermined my reality went into the folder. I labeled that page, verbal framing. Then I got to work. Every offhand comment, every photo, every time they hinted at our space or sharing responsibilities, I documented all of it. The sketch of the floor plan with my name scribbled as storage. The mug in the kitchen that said, "World's Best Grandma." The delivery from West Elm addressed to my villa with someone else's billing information. Each item added to the case I hadn't planned to build, but now felt like a necessity. That evening, I called Dahlia. "Did someone stay here last week?" I asked, voice steady. There was a pause on the line. "I wasn't sure if you knew," she said. "Your sister. 2 nights." "Your mother told me you were out of town and she had your permission." "She didn't." Dahlia didn't apologize. She didn't need to. She'd been caught in the middle, like everyone else. I ended the call and printed out the cell phone log, stuck it behind a tab labeled Guest Room Occupation. The next day, I installed a second smart lock system. No remote codes, no shared access, only me. I changed the settings on the smart home hub, removed all previous users, and reset the network password. Then I ordered a new security system. This one had facial recognition. I enrolled only one face. I didn't cry while I worked. I didn't shake or scream or throw plates. I documented. I journaled. I built a quiet wall made of facts and timestamps and receipts. That night, I slept with my phone on the nightstand. Not for emergencies, for documentation. I wrote in my notebook, I used to think strength meant doing everything for everyone. Then under it, now I know it means knowing when to stop. Before I turned off the light, I went back to a page I'd written earlier that week. I drew a line underneath the sentence. You can't be erased if you draw the lines first. I was rinsing a dish when my phone rang. No contact name, just a number that felt familiar in a vague, administrative way. I dried my hands, picked up. "Hi, Lenora, it's Colin Reynolds," the voice said. "Just circling back to confirm we're good to move forward with the co-ownership draft you requested. I have the file open, just need your sign-off." The sponge dropped into the sink, water still running. "I'm sorry, what draft?" "The co-ownership agreement. For the villa. Your mother and sister said you'd approved it weeks ago. Just finalizing a few signature placements." I didn't raise my voice. Didn't snap. My chest tightened, but my tone stayed flat. "Colin," I said slowly, "I never requested a co-ownership agreement. Nor did I authorize anyone else to speak on my behalf." Silence. Then a cough. "That's surprising." "Is it?" I leaned on the counter, eyes on the floor. "Who emailed you the draft?" "Elspeth. She said you were just too busy to handle the paperwork yourself." "Of course she did. I'll need a copy of that document and everything they sent today." "Of course," he said, suddenly formal. After I hung up, I stood there in silence for 5 full minutes. Not angry, not even shocked anymore, just calculating. They weren't just assuming things, they were rewriting them. I called Brian, my personal financial attorney, and told him everything. Within the hour, he accessed the property file. There it was, a scanned document labeled Consent to Shared Ownership, dated 2 months back. "Want me to send it over?" he asked. "Please." I opened the PDF on my laptop and felt something twist in my gut. My name, my signature. It looked like mine. It wasn't. Not from anything I actually signed with knowledge or consent. I zoomed in, checked the curvature of the G in Guilford, the slightly too slanted E I always corrected mid-flow. It was my handwriting. But it had been stolen. Flash. I remembered a birthday brunch. My mother had handed me a folder full of thank you notes. "Charity event stuff," she'd said, smiling. "Can you just sign these before dessert?" I had. Half a glass of Prosecco in, distracted, polite, wanting to keep the mood light. They'd swapped a page. I sat back, blinking slowly. "I signed away nothing," I whispered. "But they made it everything." The next day, I drove to the county registrar's office with Brian. We didn't tell anyone. We didn't give warnings. At the desk, I submitted a formal dispute against the altered property file. The clerk, a woman named Judy, reviewed the file, nodded, and flagged the entire document as pending investigation. Any transfer activity, any title modification, any access request, she explained, will be frozen for 6 months unless approved by you in person, with 2 forms of ID. Perfect. By that afternoon, we updated my living will, revoked all previously granted powers of attorney, changed access protocols on my estate files, and revoked my parents' status as emergency contacts. It's not just about the house, I told Brian. It's about the pattern. Every time I gave, they didn't see generosity. They saw a green light. I went home and opened a new folder on my computer. Reclaim. Inside, I dropped in PDFs, screenshots, timelines. I organized every voicemail, every forwarded message, every innocent-sounding email that suddenly read like stage directions. Late that evening, I drove to Monterey to visit Jordan. He'd been a friend since middle school. These days, he worked in real estate fraud investigation. Quiet, kind, had a dog named Murphy, who always climbed onto my lap whether invited or not. We sat on his back porch with glasses of wine, the fog rolling in low. I showed him the PDF. He studied it carefully, frowning, tracing a finger along the digital signature block. "This isn't just shady," he said finally. "This is illegal, felony level if you wanted to press it." I took another sip, let the words settle. "I don't want to send anyone to jail," I said. "I just want my name back." He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. "What happens when it's your own family?" Jordan's voice was steady. "Same rules, just deeper scars." I drove home past midnight, not bitter, not vengeful, just sharpened. When I got back, the house was still. I walked into the office, opened my laptop, and created a new document. Title: The Paper Trail. Subtitle: They thought I wouldn't notice. The envelope looked expensive. Gold foil edges, thick paper stock, a slight shimmer in the sunlight. It was the kind of thing that felt deliberate in its weight, like it wanted to be held longer than necessary. I found it in the mailbox on a Monday morning, buried between a gas bill and a grocery coupon book. I opened it without reading the return address. I should have known. "You're invited," it began. "A family celebration brunch. At my house." The address listed was my own. The RSVP email? Also mine. My personal account, which had somehow become communal property. And at the top, in bold script, hosted by Verena Lovelace and Elspeth Marlowe. My name was nowhere. Not a mention. Not a footnote. Not even a courtesy line like, "With love from Lenora," tucked into the corner. It was as if I didn't exist, like I was the ghost owner of my own life. I didn't text. I called. "Elspeth speaking." "It's me," I said. "Got your invitation." "Oh, good. We were just about to send you the digital version too. Isn't it elegant?" "It's hosted at my house," I said evenly. "And my name's not on it." A pause. "Well, technically, it's more of a shared thing now, isn't it?" "No," I said, voice tight. "It's not. And even if you wanted to pretend it was, you don't exclude me from something happening in my own home." "You're being overly sensitive, Lenny. It's just a formality. Of course, we meant to include you." "No," I corrected. "You didn't forget. You erased." She sighed. "Do you want us to resend it with your name?" I hung up. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and started typing. The document wasn't long, just 2 sentences. "This property is under my sole legal ownership. From this point forward, all visits must be requested and approved in writing." Then I opened a blank email draft, addressed it to Verena and Elspeth, attached the document, and hit send. No subject line, no message, just the PDF. The next morning, the cars were already lined up when I returned from my walk. Brunch. I hadn't RSVP'd. Didn't matter. Inside, everything looked perfectly staged. The dining table was set with white linen, sunflowers in mason jars, and mismatched vintage plates I didn't own. My sister spotted me first. "Oh good, you're here," Verena said, gliding over with a gift bag. "We weren't sure if you'd be back in time." She handed me the bag like we were co-hosting. Inside, I found a folded scarf, pink, with floral embroidery. It took me half a second to recognize it. I'd given it to her 5 years ago. Christmas. She'd worn it once and tossed it in a closet. Now it was wrapped in new tissue paper with a card that read, "To Lenny. Thank you for your generosity. Love always." The Lenora was spelled wrong, again. "You really thought I wouldn't recognize this?" I asked. Verena blinked. "It's symbolic." "I thought you'd appreciate the sentiment." "No," I said, stepping closer, lowering my voice. "You thought you could recycle my kindness and serve it back as validation." "Lenny, isn't it funny?" I cut in. "How much easier it is to re-gift a person's generosity than to respect their boundaries?" She looked away. I turned on my heel, walked to the guest bathroom, and dropped the scarf into the trash, on top, visible. I didn't cover it with paper or push it down, just left it sitting there like the statement it was. Back in the kitchen, the brunch crowd buzzed. My mother was laughing with someone from her church group. Verena was giving a casual tour to a couple of friends, pointing to where the nursery would go. I stood by the coffee station, listening. "We're finally making this house a home," she said to someone. "The boys deserve a yard and space to run." I stepped into the group. "What do you mean by we?" She turned, blinked, and smiled. "Oh, don't make this dramatic, Lenny. Everyone's happier when things are shared." I picked up my glass, tapped it lightly on the edge of the table, and held it up like a toast. "Let this be the last brunch you ever plan on my dime." The room froze. I set the glass down, walked past them, out the front door, and didn't look back. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. But no one followed me. That evening, I sat at my desk and drafted a letter. Certified mail, printed on heavy paper. Legal, sharp, final. To Verena Lovelace and Elspeth Marlowe, this letter serves as formal notice that I, Lenora Guilford, am the sole legal owner of the property located at address redacted. Any future visitation must be approved in writing. Any unauthorized access will be treated as civil trespassing and responded to accordingly. I folded it, sealed the envelope, and flipped it over. In black ink, I wrote on the back, "You don't get to edit me out and still eat at my table." The next morning, I walked it to the post office myself. As I stepped onto the porch, I glanced up at the surveillance camera above the driveway gate. "Let's make this official," I said. I sat at the dining table with a mug of lukewarm tea, laptop open, fingers still hovering over the trackpad. The footage loaded slowly, one frame at a time, the familiar blue timestamp blinking in the corner. I had gone back 6 days. Something had felt off. The hallway rug had shifted an inch. A drawer had been left slightly ajar. I needed to know. Fast forward. Nothing. A bird flew past the patio door. Then, the living room lights flickered on, and I hadn't been home. I hit pause. Then play again. There they were. My mother and Verena, waltzing through my hallway like they owned it. A man behind them holding a tape measure, nodding as they gestured toward walls. Laughing. Opening cabinets. My cabinets. I could almost smell the coffee mug Elspeth carried, probably the same one I'd been searching for 2 days earlier. The audio crackled, but it was enough. "We'll knock this down," Verena said, pointing to the kitchen. "Open it up." "More light," Elspeth chimed in. "And the pantry can be a small playroom if we shift the shelving." I stopped the video, rewound it, then played it again. They weren't just planning, they were executing. I hit the timestamp, saved the clip, and labeled the folder. Occupation footage. The word occupation hit me harder than I expected. But that's what this was. Not just trespassing, not just family overreach. This was something closer to a quiet, creeping annexation. I opened my bank app out of habit and froze. An alert had popped up, flagged red, unrecognized login attempt, mortgage file accessed. The timestamp read 1:12 a.m. That wasn't me. I'd been asleep. I called the bank immediately, voice steady. "Yes, Ms. Guilford," the rep said. "There was an attempt to enter through your shared recovery email. You've used that as a backup before. A family account?" 3 years ago, I replied. "During a joint tax filing. I'll be removing it immediately." She paused. We recommend locking the account and resetting all access settings. Would you like me to walk you through that? Yes, do it now. It took 15 minutes to sever every tie. I changed the pins, deactivated all recovery contacts, and revoked third-party permissions. My fingers moved faster than my breath. When the session ended, I stared at the screen. Verena. 3 years ago, she'd helped me organize documents for taxes, told me it was just easier if she typed while I read numbers off the forms. She'd added the recovery email then. I hadn't thought twice about it. They didn't need to steal it. They just used everything I gave in good faith, against me. I scheduled a visit to the local branch, face-to-face, real signatures, paper trail. The manager raised his eyebrows when I handed him the freeze request. Something serious happen? He asked. I'd call it structural damage, I said, but not to the house. I walked home, every step crisp on the sidewalk. My thoughts weren't fogged by anger anymore. They were lit up, cold and sharp. Once inside, I opened a new folder on my desktop. Case, Villa. I dropped the security footage in first, then screenshots of the login alert, email headers from the recovery address, past text messages from Verena like, "Want me to check your escrow status for you?" and "Don't worry, I can handle it. Easier if one of us talks to them." I printed the PDF copies and punched them into a bright yellow binder labeled Reclaim. Later that evening, I sat across from my attorney. "This is no longer just a moral issue," he said, scanning the printed login log. "You have grounds, real, enforceable grounds." "I know. You want me to draft a cease and desist?" "Eventually," I replied. "But not yet." He looked up. "I want them to know I'm not guessing anymore. I'm documenting." He nodded, silent approval in his eyes. When I got home, I called a private tech firm to schedule a full forensic sweep of my smart home system. I wanted a list of every login, every device connected, every time motion sensors were triggered without a code. Then I poured a glass of wine, curled onto the sofa, and waited. At 9:03 p.m., the doorbell rang. I didn't move. Instead, I opened the app. There they were again. Verena and Elspeth, standing outside the gate, fumbling with keys. Verena tried the silver one, no luck. Then the brass, still locked. She pulled her phone from her coat and turned to Elspeth. "It's not working. She must have changed it." My mother leaned in, whispered something I couldn't hear, then stepped back, her jaw set. I sat perfectly still, watching them like strangers on a screen. They brought keys. I changed locks. Let's see which one of us holds the deed to truth. Verena glanced up toward the doorbell cam. Her expression, half frustration, half disbelief, met mine through the lens. I didn't blink. The message came from a coworker. "Didn't know your sister had such a nice beach house." No emoji, no sarcasm, just casual admiration, like I should have already known. I blinked at the screen, then clicked the link. Verena had gone live on Facebook. The footage was already racking up hundreds of views. There she was, barefoot, smiling, walking through my villa like she'd just signed the mortgage papers herself. She panned the phone toward the hallway. "This will be for Mom," she said sweetly. "The boys will share across the hall, and the one with the ocean view. Ours, obviously. Ours." She never once mentioned me, not even in passing, not even as a joke. She narrated it all like she was the sole narrator of a story I no longer existed in. I didn't scream. I didn't call. I didn't even breathe for a full 10 seconds. I simply downloaded the video and added it to the folder labeled Occupation Evidence. Then I whispered, "They didn't just cross a line. They filmed it." That night, the second blow came from a different direction. A friend of the family, Melissa, sent screenshots from a group chat titled Family Future. The participants: my mother, Verena, my father, Verena's husband, even her children. Every member of the family except the one who owned the house. Me. The chat was full of excitement. Discussions about bunk bed options, dog breeds that did well by the sea, and color palettes for Mom's room. Then I saw it. A message from my mother. "We'll ease her into it. Lenny doesn't need all that space anyway." My thumb hovered over the screen, then tapped. Screenshot. 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 I didn't cry. I didn't pace the room. I sat on the couch, opened my notes app, and typed, "They don't want me included. They want me erased." Then I forwarded every image to my attorney. Subject line, intent to occupy, exclusion evidence. The next morning, I brewed a pot of coffee, waited until my hands stopped shaking, then dialed Verena. She answered like nothing had happened. "Lenny, I was just about to call you." "How long have you been planning to take over my home?" I asked flatly. There was silence on the line, no stammering, just the kind of pause that told me she'd expected this call. Then, "It's not taking over. It's just making the best use of what you have." "You mean the house I bought, furnished, maintain, insure, live in?" "Lenny, come on," she sighed. "You know how this works. You don't even like being alone. We're just trying to bring some life into the place." I let that hang, then replied, "I didn't buy a villa to host your dysfunction." She gasped. "Any further entry," I said, "without written permission will be considered unlawful trespassing." "Don't be dramatic," she snapped. "This is family." "No," I said. "This is boundaries." We hung up without goodbyes. Less than 5 minutes later, a text buzzed through. "Mom says you're overreacting, but we'll be down next weekend. Don't do anything rash." Rash. I smiled. That afternoon, I printed 3 cease and desist letters, one addressed to Verena, one to Elspeth, one to the family attorney. Each letter included a declaration of my sole ownership, a notification that any further access without consent would be met with legal action, a formal warning that all forms of manipulation, coercion, or emotional pressure were being documented. Then I updated my security system to trigger immediate alerts for any motion near doors or windows. As I tested the new system, I stood in the foyer, watched the sun fall toward the ocean, and whispered to myself, "I used to think boundaries were cruel. Now I know silence is." That evening, I stood barefoot on the upstairs balcony, sipping water from a glass tumbler. The sky was orange, my breath steady. Below, the drive was empty, but not for long. "Next weekend," I murmured, "you'll learn whose name is really on the deed." The second invitation came on a Thursday. This one was phrased even more innocently. "Join us for a family brunch," it read. No gold foil edges this time, just polite cursive on cream cardstock. The RSVP link was digital. The host names, Elspeth and Verena, my mother and my sister. Again, at my villa. Again. But this time, I didn't slam the envelope. I didn't call anyone. I accepted. Then, I opened my laptop and printed copies. Title deed, legal letters, email threads. I added the cease and desist. I tucked them into manila envelopes, sealed and labeled, one for each guest. The smart home logs showed new attempts at entry. Verena again. She'd tried to override access through a shared vendor account from 3 years ago. Probably thought I'd never notice. Probably thought I wouldn't dare stop her. I did. I reset every credential, replaced the lock permissions, set voice triggers to manual override only. And just to be thorough, I activated the interior audio recording system. Quietly, discreetly. They called it brunch. I called it documentation. By Sunday morning, the table was set. I left the doors unlocked but the cameras rolling. Dahlia had laid out the silverware. I double-checked every envelope, adjusted the place cards. Each had a name. None had mine. The first to arrive was Verena, flawless in white linen, carrying a tray of pastries. "We've really made this place feel like home already, haven't we?" she said. "Interesting choice of words," I replied. My mother followed, cheeks flushed with the glow of social grace. Carter, my father, walked behind them slowly, silent as always. Verena's husband came last, holding a toddler who had never once said my name correctly. They filed in, chatting, touching furniture, moving dishes, like guests who thought they were hosts. We sat. Coffee poured. The scent of rosemary and yeast drifted in from the kitchen. The small talk buzzed. School updates, swim meets, someone's dental surgery. I didn't interrupt. Not until they reached for the scones. "Before we cut into anything sweet," I said, rising, "I have something sour to share." Silence. I passed each envelope down the table, placing them carefully. Elspeth looked confused. Verena's mouth tightened. "What is this?" she asked. "Read it." They opened them in unison. Legal ownership declarations, cease and desist orders, smart home access logs, and the full transcript of Verena's override attempts. "This is ridiculous!" Verena snapped. "You're making a scene." "No," I said calmly. "I'm making a statement." Elspeth's voice wavered. "Lenny, this is not how family handles things." "No," I answered. "This is how boundaries handle things when family refuses to." Then I pressed play on my phone. The living room speaker picked up. Verena's voice echoed. "She'll get over it. This house is basically ours already." A gasp. Carter blinked. Verena's husband stared at the ceiling. Verena stood. "You recorded me?" I stared her down. "No, my house recorded you. That's what it does when unauthorized users access the system." "You're paranoid." "No," I said. "I'm the owner." The room sat frozen for a breath too long. Then Verena grabbed her purse, yanked her husband by the arm, and stormed out. Elspeth didn't say a word. She picked up her bag, walked out after them. No apology. No hug. Carter lingered, sipped the last of his coffee, then set the mug down gently. "I warned them," he muttered, and walked out too. I closed the door behind him, locked it. No one left a thank you, not even a goodbye. I stood there for a minute, alone in the silence that followed. The plates untouched, the coffee cooling, the house, finally mine again. Later that night, I opened the smart home app and checked the cameras. Verena's car was still outside, parked, engine off, headlights dim. She was sitting in the driver's seat, staring up at the house. I leaned back in my chair and whispered, "Round two." The plates were still there, crumbs scattered across linen napkins, mimosas half-sipped. I hadn't touched a single dish since they left. I wasn't preserving the scene out of sentiment. It felt like evidence, the kind that didn't need explaining, just observing. I moved through the dining room in silence, each step deliberate, as though the floor might betray me too. My voice echoed as I muttered to myself, "Funny how the loudest breakups are the ones with no slamming doors." No one had called, not Verena, not Elspeth, not even Carter, though I didn't expect him to. He rarely spoke unless something had to be signed. I sat down, opened my laptop, and refreshed my inbox. One new email, from Carter. Subject, about yesterday. The message was 2 lines long. I didn't agree with the way it was done, but I hope you feel heard now. Not sorry, not surprised. Strategic. I printed the email and slid it into the passive consent folder I'd started last week. Right behind the screenshot of his text asking about my property's tax ID. I didn't have time to dwell on it, though, because that's when Dahlia texted me. She rarely texted. It was a photo. At first glance, it looked like a living room wall. Neutral beige paint, framed photos arranged in a tidy grid. Then I zoomed in. The centerpiece was a professional print of my villa. Aerial shot. Stunning lighting. Centered above it were the words, "The Lovelace Legacy Home." On either side were baby photos of Verena's twins, a framed invitation from her wedding, and what appeared to be a custom family crest, gold and blue with a tree in the middle and some Latin phrase etched underneath. My name wasn't there. My photo wasn't either. Dahlia followed with a simple text. "Thought you should see this. At your parents' house." I didn't reply. Instead, I drove straight over. When Elspeth opened the door, she looked surprised. Not guilty, just irritated. Like I'd interrupted her mid-thought. "I just came to grab the old file box you said you found," I said. "Oh, right, it's in the hall closet." She stepped aside. I walked in. I passed the living room slowly, making sure she saw me see the wall. She didn't say a word, didn't explain, didn't blush, didn't stammer. She just stood there, hands folded, like I was a tenant being shown out. I picked up the file box and walked back out without asking questions, because I already knew the answers. They didn't just steal the walls. They rewrote the story inside them. Back at home, I put the file box down and didn't even open it. I'd barely poured a glass of water when my phone rang. My banker. "Hi, Ms. Guilford. Quick question. Did you initiate an application for a HELOC on your Carmel property?" "No," I said, instantly alert. "Why?" "There was an attempt filed under the name Carter Beauchamp, claimed joint property management. Said he was finalizing a family estate restructure." I closed my eyes. "He used my tax ID?" "Yes, and the parcel number." I opened a browser tab, pulled up my property tax bill, and remembered that day after brunch. Carter had asked if I still had a printed copy, said he needed it to double-check something for the family trust. "I need that flagged as fraud," I said, immediately. "Already done. We've placed a lien block on the property until we confirm sole ownership and close the file." "Thank you." I hung up and texted Brian. "They're trying to mortgage the house I live in." I opened my fraud finance folder, added the bank's email, my tax ID, the flagged HELOC application, and the voice memo I'd recorded after brunch summarizing Carter's request. They weren't just trying to move in, they were trying to turn my name into their piggy bank. That night, I sat down with a glass of wine and opened a new document on my laptop. I titled it, Villa Defense, Full Timeline. I went line by line, dating every instance. Verena's Facebook live stream, Elspeth's Just a Brunch email, Carter's HELOC application, the family group chat, the overwritten smart home logs, the scarf in the trash, the wall of framed lies, each bullet hit heavier than the last. At the top of the page, I typed, "They didn't think I was watching, but I built a house out of everything they thought I'd ignore." Just as I saved the document, my phone buzzed. New text, unknown number. "Just because you bought it doesn't mean you earned it." I didn't flinch. I didn't guess who sent it. I simply replied, "Come and prove it." The notification hit at 9:14 a.m. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, scrolling through flagged emails when my accountant's name popped up on the screen. Subject, urgent, unauthorized transaction notice. I opened it immediately. $8,400, high-end interior design firm. Paid from an old savings account I hadn't touched since grad school, one my mother used to co-manage when I was still too young to understand banking. I hadn't thought about that account in years. It was supposed to be dormant, a safety net from another life. Apparently, it had become someone else's piggy bank. Under memo, the charge read, Villa Improvements. My jaw clenched. Even my past was financing their future. I didn't wait. I froze the account within 10 minutes, then forwarded the statement to Brian and copied in the fraud investigation team we'd retained. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the reach, how far back they'd started laying claim. The quiet, manipulative threading of my identity into their plans. The funds may have been mine, but the sense of ownership they walked around with made it feel like theft. Later that afternoon, I received a message from Elise, an old family friend. Subject, you might want to hear this. It was a podcast link. Raising Families with Grace, an interview with Verena Lovelace. I put in my earbuds and hit play. Verena's voice, warm and controlled, filled the room. When my mother's health started shifting, I knew we had to step in. My husband and I made the decision to move into the coastal home, to care for her, support her. And my sister, well, she's always been independent, the kind of person who needs space to find herself again. Pause. She wasn't ready for what this house could be for all of us, but sometimes you lead with grace. You just do what needs to be done. Every word was dipped in sugar and masked with sacrifice. She sounded selfless, saintly. I didn't hear lies. I heard strategy. I opened a new document and titled it, Manipulation, Public versus on Private Persona, then typed underneath, it's not the lies that hurt most. It's the applause they get while telling them. I listened to the full 32 minutes, then saved the transcript, cut audio highlights, screenshotted her bio and the promotional post, not to retaliate, to record. The next day, I met Brian at his office. Let's make it official, I said. He didn't blink. Already ahead of you. We filed fraud alerts with all institutions linked to Carter, Verena, and Elspeth. Their names are now flagged. And the shared accounts? Revoked, permanently. All changes notarized. Everything's time-stamped. I nodded. Good. Lock it down. We reviewed the misuse of the dormant account, the credit pull from Carter's attempted HELOC, Verena's override attempts on the smart home system. Then I handed over one final folder, a full report for the authorities detailing financial manipulation and digital intrusion. As we wrapped, my phone rang. Carter. I stepped outside to take it. Lenny, he began, I think we've let this go too far. You escalated, I said, cutting him off. I'm just hitting print. He sighed. You don't need to involve the state. Let's settle this quietly. You mean in silence, like I have for years? No, I mean without making this a headline. I already have the headline, I replied. You just didn't write it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and created a backup archive, one folder, audio clips, screenshots, legal documents, footage, emails, podcasts. I named the flash drive, Full Story. I wasn't going to publish it, but I wanted to know that if anyone ever questioned what happened, if anyone ever believed the polished version Verena told on stage or behind closed doors, I had the truth, clean and silent. They thought my silence meant shame, but silence was just the space I needed to sharpen the truth. At 11:48 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Brian. We're ready for the final step if you are. The complaint draft is complete. I opened the file. It began with my name and ended with mine alone. The box was small, wrapped in matte ivory paper with a gold satin ribbon. No sender, no card. Just sitting on the front porch bench when I returned from a walk. I brought it in, placed it on the kitchen counter, and stared at it for 5 minutes before opening it. Inside was a folded card. To Verena and Adam, congratulations again. No signature. Tucked beneath the card was a crystal vase, expensive, probably from some registry, one I'd never seen or touched, but it wasn't the item that caught my breath. It was what it implied, a congratulatory gift for a housewarming, for a house I owned. I placed the box on the fireplace mantel, untouched, unspoken. I didn't throw it out, didn't smash the vase. I didn't need to. Later that evening, Dahlia stopped by to drop off a bag of garden trimmings for compost. She noticed the box. What's this? Apparently, I said, I gifted my villa as a wedding present. I must have forgotten. She arched an eyebrow, said nothing, and returned to the garden. They didn't win. They just refused to let go of the version where they did. 3 days later, I ran into Rachel, a cousin I hadn't seen since the brunch, in the produce aisle of the grocery store. Hey, she said, voice hesitant, eyes darting to make sure no one else heard. Did you really evict your mom? I picked up a bunch of kale, placed it in my basket. No, I said calmly. I redefined the word invited. She smiled nervously, gave a half shrug. People talk, you know. The family. They're saying it got ugly. They're right, I said. It did. But not for the reasons they're spreading. Rachel didn't push further. Just gave me a pat on the shoulder and wheeled her cart away. Back in my car, I had a voicemail waiting. Carter. We're not enemies, Lenora. But you made your point. I deleted it without listening to the rest. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted my silence dressed as forgiveness. I gave them neither. That afternoon, I pulled the sheets off the guest room bed, washed everything, cleared the closet, opened the windows wide. The room didn't belong to anyone anymore, which meant I could finally make it mine. I painted the walls a deep blue-gray, installed floating shelves, hung my framed degree on the largest wall, rolled in a reading chair with a burnt orange cushion, lit a candle. The room smelled like cinnamon and cedar. Dahlia stepped in while I was arranging books. Looks good in here. I nodded. It's the first time this place feels like it's mine. She smiled, placed a stack of books on the desk. It always was. You just stopped asking permission to believe it. I started journaling again. Not as defense, not to catalog or timestamp or collect evidence, just to write. For me. One morning, I posted a photo of my garden on Instagram. The caption was simple. Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's knowing who you'll never let in again. The likes rolled in. So did a few private messages from old friends, ones who had heard whispers but never knew the full story. I didn't respond to most. I didn't need to. Weeks later, I went to support a friend who was opening a new home design studio. There was wine, hors d'oeuvres, and real laughter. Not the forced photo op kind. A woman I didn't know approached me. "Don't you have a villa near the ocean?" she asked. I nodded. Yes, and I finally moved into it, emotionally. We laughed. It felt honest. That weekend, I ordered a new doormat. Simple black lettering. Off-white background. Welcome. By invitation only. I laid it at the front door, stepped back, took a breath. That evening, while watering the succulents by the windowsill, my phone pinged. A social media notification. Verena had sent a follow request. I stared at it, then tapped. Ignore. The letter arrived on a gray Monday, in a manila envelope with no return address. It was from the family's lawyer, the one who'd quietly signed off on that co-ownership draft months ago. This time, it wasn't a legal document. It was a note. "We hope time will soften you. Family should never involve paperwork." The signature was Elspeth's. Beneath it was a printed family photo. My parents, Verena, her husband, the kids, they were all smiling in front of the villa. My villa. I was there too. Faded. Literally. Digitally lightened, as if I'd been overexposed in camera. Not removed, just dimmed to a ghost. I laughed. Not out of humor, but recognition. They hadn't stopped trying to write me out. They'd just gotten better at Photoshop. I burned the envelope and the photo in the fire pit out back. Watched the edges curl. Watched my blurred face disintegrate in flames. My hand didn't shake once. They chose erasure. I chose authorship. The next morning, Dahlia knocked on the back door, holding something small in her palm. "Found this," she said. It was a key, silver, clean, clearly cut from a newer mold. "Verena left it with me a few weeks ago," she added. "Told me she was authorized in case of emergencies." "Did you ever use it?" I asked. "No," she said simply, "because I knew it wasn't hers to give." I stared at the key in her hand. It was the quiet conviction in her voice that landed hardest. Dahlia, a woman outside the bloodline, outside the politics, recognized something the rest of them refused to. Ownership. We made tea. Sat on the patio in silence, the kind that feels full rather than empty. She sipped slowly, then said, "Sometimes the people who inherit our love aren't the ones who share our last name." I didn't reply. Later, I placed the key inside a velvet-lined memory box. Alongside it, the original deed, a photo of me at age 6 holding a sandcastle bucket at the beach, and a post-it note that read, "Mine." That evening, Verena posted a new campaign partnership on her professional page, a wellness and family design brand. The photos featured our villa, my home, as the backdrop. The logo overlaid read, "Lovelace Living, Legacy Spaces." I didn't blink. Brian sent the takedown notice within the hour. Unauthorized image use. Fraud. Misrepresentation. The brand withdrew. Her professional page went dark. A small local blog picked it up. Family real estate scandal. When homes aren't home. I didn't gloat. I didn't post. I just forwarded the article to Brian with one line. Closure delivered. That night, I stood at the front window, the lights off. No curtain drawn, no shadows to hide behind. I wasn't afraid anymore of what might walk through that door. Justice isn't revenge, it's clarity made permanent. A week later, I called a locksmith. Had one final deadbolt installed. Not smart, not digital, just brass, just mine. He handed me 2 keys. I placed one on my personal chain. The other, I melted down, turned into a small sculpture. Simple, abstract, titled it Mine. I no longer answered texts. I no longer looked at old voicemails. That part of me, the one that kept searching for closure from the people who'd never apologize, she'd stopped knocking. That night, I wrote one last journal entry. They had the code, but they never had the right. I walked through my house, not to check locks or monitor cameras, just to feel the floor under my feet. The silence didn't feel like isolation anymore. It felt like residence. I closed the front door behind me, and this time, it stayed closed.